Welcome to the next installment in my video lecture series for microeconomic principles. And in this particular video lecture, I'm going to be taking a look at the Lorenz curve and the Gini coefficient. So if you realize this, what we're trying to do is measure income inequality. So the graph itself has percentage of income on the y-axis and percentage of households on the x-axis. It's important to remember with the x-axis that what we've done here is that we've sort of ranked or rank ordered the wealth of households. So we are ranking them in ascending order. We're starting with the poorest households, and as we add households in, we're adding households that have higher and higher levels of income. So for example, when I say percentage of households 10%, that's the 10% of the households with the lowest income. And as we move along this scale, we're adding households with higher levels of income, and as we keep going on, these households have even higher levels of income. So make sure you remember that this axis here represents the percentage of households, but we're starting with poorer households with the lowest levels of income, and we're progressively adding in households with slightly higher levels of income. And as we move along here, eventually we move in to the point where we have the wealthiest households, or the households with the highest levels of income. Now if you take a look at this line here, this line is very important. This line represents perfect income equality. That is, every single person in a country or an economy, as we are measuring it, has the same level of income. So for example, if I were to look at the poorest 20% of households, they would have 20% of the wealth because of the fact that everybody has the same level of income. Same thing for the house, the 40% of the lowest income households would have 40% of the income because everybody has the same level of income. So you see this straight line relationship here for this 45-degree line, and make sure you understand that because we're going to contrast that with a couple of different scenarios. So this particular line here measures perfect income equality. Every single household has the same level of income. So it's the poorest 20% of households has 20% of the income. The poorest 40% of households has 40% of the income because every single household has the same level of income. Now, if we want to go to the opposite extreme, let's go to an economy where only one person has all of the income. So let's just make this easy, and we have 100 people in this economy. All right. So if one person controls the income, all of these 99 people have absolutely nothing. So if I were to put this in terms of the percentages, the poorest 10% of individuals have no income. The poorest 20% of households have no income. 30, 40, 50, the poorest 50% of households have no income. 60, 70, 80, 90, etc. until we get to the 100th person, and then they would have all of the income in the economy. So this is the other extreme end, and what you would end up having is that this shaded area here would represent the Lorenz curve for that extreme concept of one person having all the income and all the other households in the economy having nothing. So make sure you remember that this represents income equality, all households having the same level of income, and that the opposite extreme, that if you have something that looks like this triangle here, that's the opposite end of the spectrum. This is where one household has all the income and all the other households are equal to 0. So that is the Lorenz curve. The Gini coefficient just represents the area that we have for the Lorenz curve divided by the area of that triangle right there. So for example, if there was an economy where there was only one person who had all of the income and nobody else had any other income, the Gini coefficient would be the area of this triangle divided by the area of this triangle, which would equal 1. So make sure you remember that when you have the ultimate and skewed incomes in an economy, the Gini coefficient is equal to 1. So also realize that as the Gini coefficient is creeping towards 1, that means we're having a greater income inequality in an economy. So the further you're moving towards 1, the more unequal the distribution of income. The other end of it is that if that is your Lorenz curve there, that tells you that all households have the same level of income. So the area is going to be equal to 0 because there's nothing under this 45-degree line divided by the area of that green area there. So you have 0 divided by that green area, which is equal to 0. So make sure you remember that if you have a Gini coefficient that is equal to 0, that means that we have perfect income equality. And also realize that if you start seeing the Gini coefficient moving closer to 1, that means we're moving towards a more equal distribution of income. Now, I just illustrated the extremes there. For example, if I wanted to use some actual numbers, I have some numbers here for 1967 that we could actually use. So the lowest, the bottom fifth or the bottom 20% had about 4% of the income. So let me just try to get that in there roughly. That's roughly correct. And let me change the color of that just to make it stick out a little bit. And that color is annoying, so let me take another color. The second fifth had 10.8, so we have 10.8 plus 4. We'll say 15%. So 20, the 40th percent, 14.8. Let me move up to there. And we'll just make it 15, or there's 14.8. So we had 4.0 and then 14.8. Next, we see that the third fifth has about 17.3. So if we add that into there, we get roughly 32%. So the poorest 60% control 32% of the income. Let me move that up to there. Roughly. And if we add the fourth percent, that's roughly 24, so that gives us 56% in total. So if I go from 80 up to 56%, roughly right about there, and then we would go to this point here. And if we were to fill that in, and let me make it the same color there. So that would what the Lorenz curve would look like for 1967. And if we were to take the area of this and divide by that area right there, that would give us our Gini coefficient. So make sure you're comfortable both with the Lorenz curve, what it measures, and the Gini coefficient. Also with the Gini coefficient, realize that a Gini coefficient of 0 means that we have complete income equality. If we have a Gini coefficient that's equal to 1, we have perfect inequality. We have one household having all the income and no other households having any income.